The Star King, Chapter 1. What a paradox, what a fearful reproach, when the distinction of a few hundred miles, nay, as many feet or even inches, can transform heinous crime to simple unqualified circumstance. The Honourable Boulder Bashan, in the ecclesiastic nunciamento of year 1000 at Foresee on the planet Crokinole. Law cannot reach where enforcement will not follow. Popular aphorism. Excerpts from Smade of Smade's Tavern. Feature article in Cosmopolis, October 1523. Do you ever get lonesome, Mr. Smade? Not with 3 wives and 11 children. Whatever impelled you to settle here? A rather dismal world on the whole, isn't it? Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I don't care to run a vacation resort. What kind of people patronize the tavern? People who want quiet and a chance to rest. Occasionally a traveller from inside the Pale or an explorer. I've heard that some of your clientele is pretty rough. In fact, not to mince matters, it's the general belief that Smade's Tavern is frequented by the most notorious pirates and freebooters of the beyond. I suppose they occasionally need rest too. Don't you have difficulty with these people? Maintaining order, so to speak? No, they know my rules. I say, gentlemen, please desist. Your differences are your own, they are fugitive. The harmonious atmosphere of the tavern is mine, and I intend it to be permanent. So then they desist? Usually. And if not, I pitch them into the sea. Smade was a reticent man. His origins and early life were known only to himself. In the year 1479, he acquired a cargo of fine timber, which, for a whole set of obscure reasons, he took to a small stony world in the middle beyond. And there, with the help of 10 indentured artisans and as many slaves, he built Smade's Tavern. The site was a long, narrow shelf of heath between Smade's Mountains and Smade Ocean, precisely on the planet's equator. He built to a plan as old as construction itself, using stone for the walls, timber beams and plates of schist for the roof. Completed, the tavern clung to the landscape, as integral as an outcrop of rock. A long 2-storied structure with a high gable, a double row of windows to front and rear, chimneys at either end, venting smoke from fires of fossil moss. At the rear stood a group of cypress trees, their shape completely appropriate to the landscape. Smade introduced other new features into the ecology. In a sheltered valley behind the tavern, he planted fodder and garden truck. In another, he kept a small herd of cattle and a flock of poultry. All did moderately well, but showed no disposition to overrun the planet. Smade's dominion extended as far as he cared to claim. There was no other habitation on the planet, but he chose to assert control only over an area of perhaps 3 acres, within the bounds of a whitewashed stone fence. To occurrences beyond the fence, Smade held aloof, unless he had reason to consider his own interest threatened, a contingency which had never arisen. Smade's planet was the single companion of Smade's star, an undistinguished white dwarf in a relatively empty region of space. The native flora was sparse, lichen, moss, primitive vines and palodendron, pelagic algae which tinged the sea black. The fauna was even simpler, white worms in the sea bottom muck, a few gelatinous creatures which gathered and ingested the black algae in a ludicrously inept fashion, an assortment of simple protozoa. Smade alterations of the planet's ecology could hardly, therefore, be considered detrimental. Smade himself was tall, broad and stout, with bone-white skin and jet-black hair. His antecedents, as has been mentioned, were vague, and he never had been heard to reminisce. The tavern, however, was managed with the utmost decorum. The three wives lived in harmony, the children were handsome and well-mannered. Smaid himself was unfailingly polite. His rates were high, but his hospitality was generous, and he made no difficulties about collecting his bill. A sign hung over the bar: "Eat and drink without stint. He who can and does pay is a customer. He who cannot and does not pay is a guest of the establishment." Smaid's patrons were diverse: explorers, locators, Jarnell technicians, private agents in search of lost men or stolen treasure. More rarely an IPCC representative, or weasel in the argot of the beyond. Others were folk more dire, and these were of as many sorts as there were crimes to be named. Making a virtue of necessity, Smaid presented the same face to all. To Smaid's tavern, in the July of 1524, came Kurth Gerson, representing himself as a locator. His boat was the standard model, leased by the estate houses within the Oikumene, a 30-foot cylinder equipped with no more than bare necessities. In the bow, the monitor autopilot duplex, a star finder, chronometer, macroscope, and manual controls. Midships, the living quarters, with air machine, organic reconverter, information bank and storage. Aft, the energy block, the Jarnell intersplit and further storage. The boat was as scarred and dented as any. Gerson's personal disguise was no more than well-worn clothes and natural taciturnity. Smaid accepted him on his own terms. "Will you stay a while, Mr. Gerson?" "2 or 3 days, perhaps. I have things to think over." Smaid nodded in profound understanding. "We're slack just now. Just you and the Star King. You'll find all the quiet you need." "I'll be pleased for that," said Gerson, which was quite true. His just completed affairs had left him with a set of unresolved qualms. He turned away, then halted and looked back as Smaid's words penetrated his consciousness. "There's a Star King here at the tavern?" "He has presented himself so." "I've never seen a Star King. Not that I know of." Smaid nodded politely to indicate that the gossip had reached to the allowable limits of particularity. He indicated the tavern clock. "A local time. Better to set your watch. Supper at 7 o'clock. Just half an hour." Gerson climbed stone stairs to his room, an austere cubicle containing bed, chair and table. He looked through the window along the verge of heath between mountain and ocean. 2 spacecraft occupied the landing field, his own and another ship, larger and heavier, evidently the property of the Star King. Gerson washed in a hall bathroom, then returned to the downstairs hall, where he dined on the produce of Smaid's own gardens and herd. 2 other guests made their appearance. The first was the Star King, who strode to the far end of the room in a flutter of rich garments, an individual with skin dyed jet black, eyes like ebony cabochons, as black as his skin. He was taller than average height and carried himself with consummate arrogance. Lustreless as charcoal, the skin dye blurred the contrast of his features, made his face a protean mask. His garments were dramatically fanciful: breeches of orange silk, a loose scarlet robe with a white sash, a loose striped grey and black coif which hung rakishly down the right side of his head. Gerson inspected him with open curiosity. This was the first Starking he'd observed as such, though popular belief had hundreds moving incognito through the worlds of man, cosmic mysteries since the first human visit to Lambda Grus. The second of the guests apparently had just arrived, a thin, middle-aged man of indefinite racial background. Gerson had seen many like him, miscellaneous, uncategorized vagabonds of the beyond. He had short, coarse, white hair, a sallow, undyed skin, an air of diffident uncertainty. He ate without appetite, looking back and forth between Gerson and the Starking in furtive speculation. But presently his most searching glances were directed towards Gerson. Gerson tried to avoid the increasingly insistent gaze. The least of his desires was involvement in the affairs of a stranger. After dinner, as Gerson sat watching the play of lightning over the ocean, the man sidled close, wincing and grimacing in sheer nervousness. He spoke in a voice which he tried to keep even, but which trembled nevertheless. "I assume you are here from Brinktown?" From childhood, Gerson had concealed his emotions behind a careful, if somewhat saturnine, imperturbability, but the man's question, jangling upon his own alarms and tensions, startled him. He paused before replying, gave a mild assent. "As a matter of fact, I am. I expected to see someone else, but no matter. I've decided that I can't fulfill my obligation. Your journey is pointless, that's all." He stood back, teeth showing in a humorless grin, obviously braced against an expected dire reaction. Gerson smiled politely, shook his head. "You mistake me for someone else." The other peered down in disbelief. "But you are here from Brinktown?" "What of that?" The other made a forlorn gesture. "No matter. I expected, but no matter." After a moment he said, "I noticed your ship, Mod 9B. You're a locator then?" "Correct." The man refused to be discouraged by Gerson's terseness. "You're on your way out or in?" "I've been out. I can't say that I've had luck." The other man's tension suddenly gave way. His shoulders sagged. "I own to the same line of business. As to luck," he heaved a forlorn sigh, and Gerson smelled Smade's home-distilled whiskey. "If it's bad, no doubt I have myself to blame." Gerson's suspicion was not completely lulled. The man's voice was well modulated, his accent educated. In itself it indicated nothing. He might be precisely as he represented himself, a locator in some sort of trouble in Brinktown, or he might be otherwise, a situation entailing a set of hair-raising corollaries. Gerson would vastly have preferred the company of his own thoughts, but he made a courteous gesture. "Do you care to join me?" "Thank you." The man seated himself gratefully, and with a new air of bravado seemed to dismiss all of his worries and apprehensions. "My name is Legal T-Halt. Will you drink?" Without waiting for assent, he signalled one of Smade's young daughters, a girl of 9 or 10, wearing a modest white blouse and a long black skirt. "I'll use whiskey, lass, and serve this gentleman whatever he decides for himself." T-Halt appeared to derive strength either from the drink or from the prospect of conversation. His voice became firmer, his eyes clearer and brighter. "How long have you been out?" 4 or 5 months, said Gerson in his role of locator. "I've seen nothing but rock and mud and sulphur. I don't know whether it's worth the toil." Tealt smiled, nodded slowly. But still, there's always excitement. The star gleams. You notice a circlet of planets. You ask yourself, will it be now? And time after time, the smoke and ammonia, the weird crystals, the wind of monoxide, the rains of acid. But you go on and on and on. Perhaps in the region ahead, the elements coalesce into nobler forms. Of course, it's the same slime and black trap and methane snow. And then suddenly, there it is, utter beauty. Gerson sipped his whiskey without comment. Tealt apparently was a gentleman, well-mannered and educated, sadly come down in the world. Tealt continued, half talking to himself. Where the luck lies, that I don't know. I'm sure of nothing. Good luck looks to be bad luck. Disappointment seems happier than success. But then, bad luck I would never have recognised as good luck. I called it bad luck still. And who can confuse disappointment with success? Not I. So it's all one, and life proceeds regardless. Gerson began to relax. This sort of incoherence, at once engaging and suggestive of deeper wisdom, could not be imagined amongst his enemies, unless they hired a madman. Gerson made a cautious contribution. Uncertainty hurts more than ignorance. Tealt inspected him with respect, as if the statement had been one of his profound wisdom. You can't believe that a man is better for ignorance. Cases vary, said Gerson, in as easy and light a manner as was natural to him. It's clear that uncertainty breeds indecision, which is a dead halt. An ignorant man can act. As for right and wrong, each man has his own answer. Tealt smiled sadly. You espouse a very popular doctrine, ethical pragmatism, which always turns out to be the doctrine of self-interest. Still, I understand you where you speak of uncertainty, for I am an uncertain man. He shook his thin, sharp-featured head. I know I'm in a bad way, but why should I not be? I've had a peculiar experience. He finished the whiskey, leaned forward to gaze into Gerson's face. You are perhaps more sensitive than first impressions would suggest, and possibly younger than you seem. I was born in 1490. Tealt made a sign which could mean anything, searched Gerson's face once more. Can you understand me if I say that I have known overmuch beauty? I probably could understand, said Gerson, if you made yourself clear. Tealt blinked thoughtfully. I will try. He considered. As I have admitted to you, I am a locator. It is a poor trade, with apologies to you, for eventually it involves the degradation of beauty, sometimes only to a small extent, which is what a person such as myself hopes for. Sometimes there is only small beauty to corrupt, and sometimes the beauty is incorruptible. He made a gesture of his hand towards the ocean. The tavern harms nothing. The tavern allows the beauty of this terrible little planet to reveal itself. He leaned forward, licking his lips. The name Malagate is known to you? Attil Malagate? For a second time Gerson was startled. For a second time the reaction failed to reach his face. After another slight pause, he asked casually, Malagate the Woe, so-called? Yes, Malagate the Woe. You're acquainted with him? And Lugol Tealt peered at Gerson through eyes which had suddenly gone leaden, as if the mere act of naming the possibility had renewed his suspicion. "Only by reputation," said Gerson, with a bleak twitch of a smile. Teal'c leaned forward with great earnestness. "Whatever you have heard, I assure you, it is flattery." "You don't know what I've heard." "I doubt if you have heard the worst, but nevertheless." And the astounding paradox, Teal'c closed his eyes. "I am locating for Atel Malagate. He owns my ship. I have taken his money. It's a difficult position. When I found out, what could I do?" Teal'c threw up his hands in an excited, extravagant gesture, reflecting either emotional turmoil or the effects of Smade's whiskey. "I asked myself this over and over. I did not make this choice. I had my ship and my money, not from an estate house, but from an institution of dignity. I did not think of myself as a common locator. I was Lugal Tihalt, a man of parts, who had been appointed to the post of chief explorer for the institution, or some such folly. So I assured myself. But they sent me out in a 9B boat, and I could no longer delude myself. I was Lugo Tihalt, common locator." "Where is your boat?" asked Gerson, idly curious. "There is only my own and the Starking's out on the landing field." Teal'c pursed his lips in another onset of weariness. "I have good reason for caution." Teal'c glanced right and left. "Would it surprise you to learn that I expect to meet—" He hesitated, thought better of what he planned to say, and sat silently for a moment, looking into his empty glass. Gerson signalled, and young Araminta Smade brought whisky on a white jade tray, upon which she herself had painted a red and blue floral border. "But this is inconsequential," said Teal'c suddenly. "I bore you with my problems." "Not at all," said Gerson quite truthfully. "The affairs of Atel Malagate interest me." "I can understand this," said Teal'c after another pause. "He is a peculiar combination of qualities." "From whom did you have your boat?" Gerson asked ingenuously. Teal'c shook his head. "I will not say. For all I know, you may be Malagate's man. I hope not, for your own sake." "Why should I be Malagate's man?" "Circumstances suggest as much, but circumstances only. And in fact I know that you are not. He would not send someone here whom I have not met." "You have a rendezvous, then?" "One I don't care to keep. But I don't know what else to do." "Return to the Okumene?" "What does Malagate care for that? He comes and goes as he pleases." "Why should he concern himself with you? Locators are 20 to the dozen." "I am unique," said Teal'c. I am a locator who has found a prize too precious to sell." Gerson was impressed in spite of himself. "It is a world too beautiful for degradation," said Teal'c. "An innocent world, full of light and air and colour. To give this world to Malagate for his palaces and whirligigs and casinos would be like giving a child to a squad of Sarquay soldiers. Worse, possibly worse. And Malagate knows of this?" "It is my unfortunate habit to drink rashly and talk wildly." "As you do now," suggested Gerson. Teal'c smiled, his wincing, morose smile. "You could tell Malagate nothing he does not already know. The damage was done at Brinktown. Tell me more of this world. Is it inhabited? Tealt smiled again, but made no answer. Gerson felt no resentment. Tealt, beckoning to Araminta's maid, ordered phrase, a heavy sour-sweet liquor reputed to include amongst its constituents a subtle hallucinizer. Gerson signified that he would drink no more. Night had long settled over the planet. Lightning crashed back and forth. A sudden downpour began to drum on the roof.